Hey everybody, it's Mr. Bowman. People requested I make more cooking videos, and I want to do cooking videos that are based on things we have around the house, and that'll be really good. Now with the quarantine, some people are having a lot of trouble getting hold of is pasta. We all like pasta, it's wonderful. Now when we get pasta in the store, it can be pretty inexpensive, which is great, but it's not expensive to make your own. It's actually really cheap. Now right now it's a little hard to get some of these ingredients, but you may already have them in your house. Let's look at homemade pasta. Now you have lots of different recipes available to you online. There's even a 2-ingredient one. We're gonna do a 4-ingredient one, but it's pretty straightforward. So here's our recipe right here. Homemade pasta. We're gonna have 3 large eggs beaten. We've got our eggs right here. We have 2 cups of flour. I've already measured up our flour. You're gonna have 1 tablespoon of olive oil. There's a tablespoon right here. Here's our olive oil. And we're gonna have 1 teaspoon of salt. Now this is my little salt cellar. Here's my little teaspoon. So we're gonna measure those out in a second. So these are recipes. You can find some recipes where it's just egg and flour. And the pasta that you get in the store, the dried stuff that comes in the box, is actually just flour and water. But that's a different process that we're not gonna be doing. That's an industrial process that maybe you could do at home, but I never have. Now this way we're gonna do it, we're going to have our pasta dough. You can make it with a mixer, you can make it with a blender even, you can make it with a food processor. We're gonna go old school, we're gonna make it by hand. People even have pasta making machines where it will roll out and cut the dough, and those are pretty cool, and I've used them, I have them. I wanna go totally old school today. Can you make pasta with just these ingredients in your hands? Totally can, that's what we're gonna do right now. So I'm gonna take off my wedding ring, because this is gonna be very hands intensive. Putting that down there. I'm also gonna put on a headband. I could wear a hat too, but I didn't like the shadows. I don't want my hair getting in the food or in my eyes, so I'm gonna get it out because my hands are about to get very, very messy. So I'm gonna wash my hands and we're gonna get this going. Then we're gonna beat our egg. My hands are washed, my hair's up, my ring's off. I cracked the eggs. Here's our eggs right here. Let's beat these. Now, they don't have to be like a crazy scramble where they're all fluffy. I just need to mix together real quick. So a quick flopping around of these guys in a bowl with a spoon, with a fork rather. There you go, that's plenty beaten. They're gonna get mixed up a lot more as we mix up our dough. We're gonna leave that for a second. Now, we have here our flour. I need to put in my salt. I'm sorry, my salt, it's 1 teaspoon of salt, so that's this little guy. Now, a teaspoon is 1/3 of 1 tablespoon. So if you only have one or the other, 3 of these equals 1 of these. So that helps us quite a bit. They're kind of arbitrary measurements, but that's how this works. So, I've got my salt, my little salt cellar. Level it off, a little shake. Put it in here. Now I'm gonna mix this up a little bit, just with my measuring spoon. I'm not using it again for anything anyway. Normally you'd wanna sift ingredients. When you look at recipes, they'll talk about sifting your dry ingredients on recipes, baking, whatever else it is. I'm not gonna sift right now. 1, we're gonna mix it well enough like this, and it's gonna have a lot of other opportunities to mix. 2, I don't own a sifter. Lots of people don't own sifters. They're cool and they're great, but you don't really need them. Now here's where it's gonna get crazy. Often when you're making pasta or bread dough, old school is you do it right on the clean counter. And I did clean this counter off. I could cook straight on it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and use my cutting board in part because it lets me do this cool thing. Put this right on here. And now, whammo. Now I'm only doing that because I have this pre-measured. If you don't have it pre-measured, you can just measure directly onto whatever surface you're gonna use. Now, this is when it gets really fun and cool. I have my little hill of flour. I'm gonna make a little, what they call a well in this. I've got my well. Now into here, I'm gonna pour all of my egg right into my well. And after a little bit gets out, it's okay. I'm gonna unite it all in just a moment. Oh, this is why I should have just done it on the counter. That's all right, we'll make it all work. Here, cut for a second, Jet. Okay, here's the mistake I made. I didn't have a big enough cutting board. So my well that I made wasn't really deep enough. I probably should have started in a bowl, but you know what? That's how I learn. I'm okay with it. But I've now shifted to everything just on the counter. It's a good thing I had it cleaned in advance so I could go old school, because I ended up going old school. I put in my olive oil, and now I'm mixing together my dough. Now, this starts coming together. It's gonna seem a little bit dry at first. It's like, well, wait a second, that's really dry. It's not like we're making cookie dough. We're making pasta dough. And this is actually coming together really nicely. It's not going to be the smoothest, craziest thing in the world. Depending on the kind of flour you use, you'll get different amounts of smoothness with it. We're using a general all-purpose flour that someone would have in their house, and that'll work just fine. Now, it's starting to come together. I'm gonna keep mixing. This is gonna take me about 5 minutes or so of really good kneading, of working everything in. And in just a moment, I'll show what it looks like when it's totally done getting mixed. See you in a minute. All right, so it's been about 5 minutes, maybe a little more, and I've been kneading this and working in my hands. Here it is. I've got something about just about all I can fit in my 2 hands, and it looks pretty good. This is a big ball of pasta dough. This is it. Now it's not perfectly smooth, but it's all pretty well integrated. Jet, what do you think? Seem good?
Can I have a bite?
No, you cannot have a bite. So you shouldn't eat this raw dough because it has raw egg in it. We are going to cook it eventually. But before we do that, we need to cut it and shape it. But before we do that, we need to let it rest. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it in a bowl. It's in a bowl. I'm going to cover it up with saran wrap and plastic wrap. And I'm going to let it rest in the fridge for about 40 minutes or so. Now you could let it rest longer.
That's
you could let it rest
a long
overnight.
time.
It's a long time. So I'm going to let it rest for a bit, and then I'm going to work on it. You'll notice when you finish kneading it together into a ball, it's going to feel very dry. You might be tempted to add water to it. Don't add water to it. You're going to find that when we have it done resting, the water in the eggs will have saturated everything. The moisture in there will have saturated all the wheat flour in here. It'll spread out, and it will actually feel wetter in 40 minutes than it does right now. Can you check it out? Feels pretty dry, right?
Yeah,
But it will feel better in just a bit. So that's great. I'm going to put this away, let it rest, clean out my workstation, and then we'll be ready for the next step. See you in about 40 minutes, or well, you know, in about 1 second when I edit the video. Okay, everybody, we're back to it. So I've got my dough. It's been resting for about 45 minutes. It's right here. It's all ready. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and roll it out. Now, I happen to be missing my cameraman. He went off to do other things, but that's cool. We're going to make this all happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set out my dough. I've got my clean surface here. You want generally to lightly flour whatever surface you're using. If you're using a cutting board, although we saw earlier, you need a rather large cutting board, lightly surface this so that nothing sticks to it. Now our dough is a little bit dry already, so it's probably not going to have that much in the way of sticking problems. Here it is. We're going to do that anyway. You're going to put that bowl away. Now if you feel like, oh, this is just too dry, I can't even work with this, it's okay. Remember, we're going to have to cook this. We're going to boil it in water, and it's bound to absorb water during that process. So you really don't need to worry about too much. Now all this work of having to knead it and press it and roll it, which I'm going to use with a fast camera. What we're doing with this, all this stuff can be done with a machine. Now, all this machine stuff is kind of expensive. So if you decide to use a machine, that's great. There's less expensive ones that have hand cranks to them, or you can get attachments for a stand mixer. This is one of them. This would be doing the job of flattening and smoothing and pressing it out, this thing I'm about to do with a rolling pin. And then cutting, which we're going to do in a little bit, would have a different attachment. This is for fettuccine. Basically, you can see the kind of gap there. That is where it would cut the noodles. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to do this old school and just roll it on out. Let's see what we can do. So this is the point of the video where it's me just rolling things out. I didn't really think about the fact that there wasn't going to be sound for this. So now I'm talking to you. Later in the video, I'm going to say that this makes plenty of food for your whole family. It kind of didn't, but we'll come back to that in a second. That took a while. That was a lot of work. I haven't actually done this by hand before, at least not in a really long time. But I'm really glad I'm doing it now. 1, it was a great exercise. 2, as you saw in the time-lapse video, I actually changed up my technique partway through. What I did was I changed up my rolling pin. Initially, I was using this one. It's kind of a fancy silicone-coated one. It's supposed to be non-stick. It was great. It was non-stick. I just didn't find it very comfortable. I didn't really like using it very much. And I switched to my old-school French rolling pin. No fancy handles, just a stick of wood. But I liked it a lot more. I found I had a lot more control, and I liked the feel of it in my hands a lot more. But in the end, we have a big sheet of pasta dough. Whoa. We have a big sheet of pasta dough. Now, with this, we have lots of options. I took it, it's in a roughly square rectangular shape. You see there's little holes in it here and there. That's fine. It doesn't have to be perfectly regular. I like that this is rustic. I like that this is more handmade in its feel. The noodles are going to be that way too. Now, with one of the pieces of dough, I just like shaped this little shell-looking thing. It's kind of an, I'm going to mispronounce it. It's an orecchiette, something like that, which means little ears. Now, I could just shape all this pasta dough into various little shapes, and I could cook those up. We find there are hundreds of different shapes of pasta in Italian food, but we're gonna try to make basically a rough linguine or fettuccine. Now the thing with doing this is, it's bound to be not perfect. In fact, it's gonna be pretty far from perfect. I have my dough, so it's relatively thin. We're looking at, most of it's probably around 1/8 of an inch or so. Some parts a little thicker, but that's all right. What I'm trying to do is get it so that it's relatively uniform in shape and size. But those little bits that are a little bit thicker or thinner, they're just gonna give the pasta more personality. I think that's great. I think that's really cool. That's what separates this from the stuff in the boxes. And it's gonna cook, it's gonna absorb water, and it's gonna get thicker than this. No matter how thin you make it, it's gonna be 2 to 3 times thicker upon cooking. So make sure you get it much thinner than you think you want it to be. Then we're gonna be in good shape. How we're gonna do this is we're gonna roll it up, and then we're gonna cut it into thin slices, picture like a cinnamon roll kind of thing before it's cut into rolls when it's just a big long thing. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna loosely roll this up. If it's sticky, you might wanna put a little flour in between as you roll, but I don't think we're gonna need to for this one. And then we're gonna cut it very carefully with as little pressure as possible because we don't wanna link up the pieces. Then we're gonna hang up the pieces. I'll talk to you about it in a second. Let's go ahead and show you what I mean. So here we are, we're gonna roll it. Now, whichever direction I roll it, that's gonna be my length of noodles. So I could do it shorter noodles or longer noodles. I'm gonna go ahead and do it longer ways because it's not gonna be perfect for me anyway. And very loosely roll this up, very carefully because I don't want to combine all my layers together. Now I have my big roll of noodles. Well, it's not a noodle yet, it's not a roll of noodles so much as just a roll of noodle. Now I'm gonna take my knife and I'm gonna cut this. Whatever width I cut, that's the width I'm looking at for my noodles. Now these are still pretty rough on the edges here, but as we get deeper in, these are gonna be my noodles. Now check this out, I got that slice there. This, if I carefully unroll it, I now have pasta noodles. That is an individual noodle, all ready to go, which is pretty slick. Now, as I'm working with these, if I just make a big pile of these, I'm gonna end up with kind of a mess. So what people usually do is they use something called a pasta rack. This is a pasta rack. It's just a stick with a bunch of other sticks in it. Now what you do is you take your piece of pasta, you put it on the rack, and then you would continue unrolling them and putting them on the rack. Now here's the thing. You're thinking, Bowman, I thought I could do this with just equipment I have in the house. And you can. You don't need a full, oh, this one just broke. That's all right. They can be a little bit irregular. I'll have a slightly shorter noodle here, but that's not a big deal. So you don't need a pasta rack to do this. There's lots of ways to do it. For instance, before I owned a pasta rack, I just went to my bedroom. And what I have there? Clothes hangers. I set them on the handles here, and suddenly I have places to hang my pasta. It can sit there while it cures. By cure, I just mean it's gonna kind of slightly dry and not stick to each other. Now, after it cooks, I have a couple of options. One, I can throw it right into boiling water. It's gonna cook fast, 30 seconds to a minute. Like, it's not gonna take long. Drain it, serve it with sauce, serve it with just butter and olive oil, serve it with whatever you want. It's gonna be fantastic. Or if I don't want to serve it right away, I can take it after it's dried for a bit, put it in little coils, and I can save those in the fridge for about 3 days or so. It is raw egg, so you don't want to save it very long. If you want to use it later down the road than just 3 days, you can always freeze it for later use. It'll last for months in the freezer. It'll be totally fine. Don't worry about that. All right, I'm gonna cut this pasta. I'll see you in a second. So back to that thing about amounts. My sons and I crushed this. I would say if you're really hungry, this recipe is probably enough for 2 full-grown adults / teenagers. It really was fun. It really turned out well. Although cooking time was a little longer than I anticipated, it was really good stuff. I think you're really gonna like it. And oh my God, there's so much time where you just have to look at my weird face and weird expressions. I mean, if it's hard for you to look at, think of how much it hurts me. I have to wake up looking like that every day. So we have a ton of pasta now. Look at all this. It's awesome. All hand cut, hand mixed, ready to go. Now I haven't done it by hand in a really, really long time. One of the things I realized is as I was unrolling it, I could feel when it was about to break, particularly when it was at kind of like the edges of the roll where it got pressed down. They were almost like seams on it. So what I did was I would use my fingers as I unrolled it to pinch those back together to keep them from crumbling. That was hugely helpful to me and made it so I have a lot of pasta, most of it of pretty good length. Some of it's broken and short, but that's okay, that's not a big deal. Again, it's just gonna give it character. Now when I cook this, I'm gonna wanna cook it in heavily salted, boiling water, which is how you always cook pasta, right? Even when it's the dry pasta you get at the store. Here's the thing. The way to tell if this is done, or at least a really good start, when you put it in the water, it's going to sink. As it's done, it will start to float. When it floats, you're done. You can pull it out. Now again, these are gonna end up pretty thick and pretty chewy and toothsome. It's a different experience than what you've had in the past. It's a much more rustic experience. There was a restaurant when I was in Denver called Patsy's. Sadly, it's closed now. And Patsy's made all of their spaghetti by hand like this. And it was different than anything I'd ever had. It had a certain, I don't know, character to it that I really love and frankly, that I really miss. So I hope that you'll enjoy having it like this. Let's cook up a piece and see what happens. I'm not gonna make a full meal right now because I'm gonna save it for my family for later. But let's see how it goes. Right here I've got my boiling water. Here's my noodle. I'm gonna set it in pretty gently. Now one of the nice things is, since it's loose and soft, I don't need a big giant pot of water because it's not gonna be tall and sticking out. So I'm gonna let that cook. It's not gonna take very long. Let's see how long it takes. Okay, that's about done. It's floating on the surface. It's been about a minute, maybe a little more, minute and a half, but not very long when you're used to boiling pasta for, 10, 12 minutes, something like that. So let's see how it is. I'm gonna pull it out with my little pasta fork, although you could use anything to do it, really. Well, not your fingers. Don't use your fingers for this. That'd be super dangerous. So don't do that. All right, let's see how this is. It's good. Now, usually when you're cooking pasta, you want to pull it and try a bite. Just pull like one of them. Don't dump out the whole thing to see if it needs more time to cook. This probably does need more time. It's awfully good. Now, I'm going to use this, a little bit of tomato sauce later, some Parmesan, all that, kind of the usual. But I'm going to let it cook a little more. But it would have been great just with some butter and salt, a little olive oil and toasted garlic, something like that. Really nice thing about pasta is it works with a lot of things, with whatever you have in the house. All right, let me know if you make some. Let me know how it turns out. And next time we'll make something new. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Real quick postscript. I wasn't gonna put this on. I went and just made myself a lunch with some of the noodles. It's worth seeing how much bigger they get. So here's my bowl of pasta. I have an arrabbiata sauce here. But look at this noodle. This thing is a monster. It's about twice as wide, maybe 3 times as wide as it was when I cut it. And it's easily 2 or 3 times as thick. Now, that might be a little bit startling if you're like, oh my God, these are enormous suddenly. It's part of why it's important that you roll it out as thin as you can and that you cut it as thin as you can. Understanding it does make it more brittle. The thinner you roll it and the thinner you cut it, the more brittle they're gonna be before they cook. But when they cook, they're gonna take on this really meaty, chewy thing so that a handful of noodles is suddenly a meal. So that recipe we did is plenty of pasta for your whole family. All right, let me know how it goes. Good luck. Ooh, maybe next time we'll do one on how to make the pasta sauce. All right, talk to you soon. Bye. Noodles, homemade noodles, thumbs up. Jetson, homemade noodles, thumbs up.
They're really good.
Thanks, buddy. I'm glad you guys like them.
They taste a little bit like waffles.
Huh, that's an interesting thing. Butter and a little bit of salt and you're a happy guy, huh? Cool.